Welcome back to the underground. Let's look at what everyone refuses to see. This episode bridges Carl Jung's visionary Red Book illustrations with George Orwell's isolated writing of 1984 on the island of Jura, exposing how our modern mindset is engineered from the darkest depths of the collective psyche. Walk down with me into the damp, echoing basement of the BBC Broadcasting House in London. The year is 1941. Concrete walls soak up the hum of vacuum tubes and the nervous energy of men drafting words that will cross oceans. They call this place Room 101. Not yet a torture chamber of literary fiction, but a physical room. A literal space of subterranean gray stone, where messages are forged, designed to slip quietly past the conscious defenses of millions, and lodge themselves deep inside foreign minds. Imagine sitting at a heavy wooden desk down here, hours before the sun ever reaches the basement grates. George Orwell spent his days in this exact damp environment between 1941 and 1943, writing broadcasts for the BBC Eastern Service. He was tasked with beaming words to India, shaping a narrative designed to counter Axis propaganda. But listen closely. When you control the vocabulary of a broadcast, you aren't just sharing news. You are constructing a cognitive framework. You are building an invisible cage out of syntax and inflection. Orwell watched his own government draft sentences meant to occupy foreign thoughts. He saw how easily a human mind could be looped into a pre-written track. Long before he ever sketched out the Ministry of Truth, he was standing right inside its physical prototype, breathing the dust of state-sanctioned speech. While Orwell was measuring out syllables in a London cellar, another architect of the mind had already mapped the raw terrain of those thoughts. Decades earlier, between 1913 and 1916, Carl Jung experienced a profound psychological breakdown. He didn't run from the hallucinations. He walked straight into them. Armed with a red leather-bound journal, he began a grueling discipline he called active imagination. He painted his inner demons. He gave shapes to the formless entities whispering from the dark. Jung realized something terrifying about the human psyche. We like to think we are captains of our own souls. We think our thoughts belong exclusively to us. But Jung discovered an autonomous psychic system. A massive, churning ocean beneath the floorboards of our personal awareness. He called it the collective unconscious. A realm that operates entirely independently of human will. Think about what that actually means. An autonomous system. It means your deepest fears, your sudden urges, your automated political outrage, they might not originate with you at all. They can be piped in. Jung sat in his study in Kusnacht, watching archetypes rise out of his inkwell like smoke. He knew these ancient patterns could be triggered, manipulated, steered by external forces if someone knew the right symbolic keys to turn. And across the English Channel, in the middle of a world war, communications bureaucrats were starting to figure out how to turn those keys on an industrial scale. They didn't need physical chains anymore. They had discovered that if you project the right symbols into the collective unconscious, the human animal will willingly march into its own enclosure and lock the deadbolt from the inside. Let's trace how these two divergent paths crossed in the machinery of empire. The BBC Eastern Service was not merely a cultural exchange. It was an instrument of psychological steering. Orwell sat at his typewriter, hammering out scripts that had to clear censors, clear political committees, and hit the psychological frequency required to hold a distant subcontinent in ideological alignment. He understood the mechanics of persuasion intimately. He knew that to dominate a population, you must first domesticate their language. Strip away nuance. Replace complex emotional realities with binary slogans. Room 101 was the incubator for this technique. The physical walls were damp and gray, but the mental architecture being constructed was slick, modern, and entirely inescapable. Every broadcast was a small anchor dropped into the deep waters of the collective mind. Notice the eerie symmetry between Jung's visions and Orwell's bureaucratic reality. Jung spent years documenting the autonomous forces of the psyche, warning that modern humanity was losing its connection to its own inner depth, making people dangerously susceptible to external suggestion. Orwell lived that vulnerability firsthand, watching the state harness radio waves to project manufactured realities into millions of living rooms. When you combine Jung's collective unconscious with Orwell's broadcasting booth, the blueprint of the modern surveillance state snaps sharply into focus. Our modern media environment isn't an accident of technology. It is a direct architectural descendant of these wartime experiments. Every algorithm feeding your feed today is just an automated version of Room 101. Mining your subconscious reactions and feeding them back to you in a closed loop. We sit in our quiet rooms tonight, scrolling through glowing rectangles, believing our opinions are entirely our own, believing our anger is spontaneous. But look closer at the machinery humming behind the glass. The algorithms know your psychological triggers better than you do. They map your archetypes, nudge your collective fears, and whisper through the speakers just like the old transmitters in London. The walls of Room 101 were never torn down. They were simply digitized, multiplied, and installed inside every pocket on Earth. Until next time, keep your mind your own. Farewell.